In an extraordinary turn of events that has left Britain's political establishment reeling, Nigel Farage delivered one of the most dramatic and combative performances in recent memory during a live-streamed broadcast that drew record-breaking viewership across multiple platforms. The highly anticipated exchange with Prime Minister Keir Starmer, billed in advance as a debate but rapidly devolving into an all-out confrontation, has already been described by political analysts as a watershed moment in UK politics. Farage, who has long styled himself as the uncompromising voice of ordinary Britons disillusioned with the political elite, capitalized on a charged atmosphere in Starmer's cautious, technocratic manner to dismantle his opponent's arguments with a mixture of raw populist rhetoric, sharp personal attacks, and a relentless barrage of statistics and anecdotes designed to portray the Labour government as weak, detached, and fundamentally dishonest. For more than 2 hours, Farage maintained a tone of fiery indignation, peppering his delivery with references to immigration failures, economic stagnation, and what he characterized as the moral bankruptcy of a ruling class that refuses to listen, while Starmer appeared increasingly defensive and hesitant. Clips of the clash spread virally within minutes, trending at the top of X, formerly Twitter, and YouTube under hashtags like #Farage vs Starmer and #UKPoliticsErupts, signaling the scale of public attention this moment had commanded. The significance of the confrontation extended far beyond the optics of a high-profile row. For years, critics have accused Farage of being a political sideshow figure, adept at grabbing headlines but incapable of building durable electoral support. Yet the broadcast demolished that caricature by showing him in command of both narrative and numbers, appealing simultaneously to grassroots frustration and to a sense of urgency that resonated with voters across multiple demographics. Pollsters were quick to release snap surveys that showed a dramatic shift in public opinion. According to one poll conducted within 24 hours of the broadcast, 62% of respondents believed Farage had won the exchange, while only 21% felt Starmer had performed strongly. In marginal constituencies that Labour has worked tirelessly to defend, the reaction was even more pronounced, with anecdotal reports of longtime Labour supporters acknowledging Farage's authenticity compared to what they described as Starmer's robotic lawyer talk. Newspapers from across the spectrum, even traditionally Labour-leaning outlets, acknowledged the scale of the impact, with headlines such as "Farage lands knockout blow" and "Starmer shaken as populism surges." Commentators warned that the confrontation could mark the beginning of a new phase in British politics, one where the traditional two-party dominance faces a destabilizing challenge from insurgent forces that are no longer content with. The immediate fallout in Westminster has been nothing short of chaotic. Labour MPs, many of whom had previously dismissed Farage as a fading relic of Brexit-era politics, found themselves scrambling to contain the narrative, issuing coordinated statements aimed at reasserting confidence in Starmer's leadership. Yet privately, several backbenchers confessed to deep unease, admitting that the Prime Minister's performance had been flat, overly rehearsed, and ill-suited to the live-stream format, where authenticity often trumps preparation. Conservative figures, meanwhile, watched the spectacle with a mixture of amusement and anxiety, recognizing that Farage's resurgence could eat into their own base just as much as Labour's, particularly in regions where anti-establishment sentiment is strongest. Social media platforms became a battleground of competing interpretations. Labour activists attempted to downplay Farage's attacks as demagoguery, while Farage supporters flooded timelines with clips of their champion interrupting, correcting, and, in their view, humiliating the Prime Minister in real time. The Conservative Party's communications team, perhaps sensing an opportunity, amplified these clips further, with one Tory MP tweeting, "Farage said what many of us have been thinking for years. Starmer is not up to the job." For the political class, the fear is no longer that Farage is a distraction, it is that he is becoming the central story. Beyond the immediate Westminster intrigue, the broader implications for Britain's democracy are profound. The broadcast demonstrated the raw power of digital platforms to bypass traditional media filters and deliver unmediated political confrontation directly to millions of citizens, altering the balance of how political legitimacy is contested. Farage's ability to frame the conversation on his own terms, without the constraints of conventional broadcast moderators, allowed him to channel public anger in a way that television studios rarely permit. The explosive public response suggests that Britain is entering an era where political influence is measured less by parliamentary debates and more by the capacity to dominate online attention cycles. Analysts warn that this shift, while energizing for democratic engagement, also carries risks, as the pursuit of viral soundbites can eclipse sober policymaking. For Keir Starmer, the challenge is existential. He must now prove that he can withstand populist firepower and reconnect with voters before his government's authority unravels. For Nigel Farage, the moment represents vindication after decades of being branded an outsider. He has demonstrated not only that he can command a stage but that he can shake the very foundations of the political establishment. Whether this eruption heralds a durable realignment or a fleeting spectacle remains to be seen, but one fact is now undeniable: the balance of power in UK politics has shifted, and the aftershocks will reverberate. As the dust settled following the livestream showdown, the political establishment found itself grappling with an uncomfortable truth: Farage's brand of insurgent populism had not only survived but thrived in a digital-first landscape where authenticity, outrage, and raw passion outweigh carefully crafted policy lines. Keir Starmer, whose leadership has always relied on projecting calm authority and a promise of stability, appeared visibly shaken in subsequent interviews. The Prime Minister attempted to pivot the conversation back to Labour's policy agenda, focusing on economic reforms, NHS funding, and Britain's post-Brexit trade challenges. Yet the shadow of Farage's fiery dismantling loomed large, undermining his attempts to regain composure. Every time Starmer spoke, pundits replayed clips of the livestream where he hesitated, fumbled for notes, or was caught off guard by Farage's piercing retorts. This relentless cycle of replay and commentary not only magnified Farage's perceived victory but also cemented the impression that Starmer, despite holding the highest office in the land, could not withstand the populist force now dominating the national conversation. Reactions from within Labour's grassroots movement were equally telling. In constituencies across the Midlands and Northern England, local activists reported frustration and disappointment, with many warning that Labour's messaging was failing to connect with working-class communities already disenchanted by rising living costs and a sense of betrayal after years of promises from both major parties. Town hall meetings and local Labour forums erupted into heated debates, with younger members demanding a more aggressive communication strategy to counter Farage's digital dominance. Meanwhile, trade union leaders urged caution, warning that overreacting could elevate Farage further by giving him precisely the establishment opposition he thrives against. Yet the broader mood remained uneasy, with opinion polls continuing to show erosion in Labour's support, especially among undecided voters. Political strategists noted the dangerous parallel with Brexit-era dynamics, where Farage's ability to frame the narrative forced larger parties to react defensively, ultimately leading to seismic political shifts that traditional polling had underestimated until it was too late. On the Conservative side, the reaction was more complex, marked by both delight and dread. Senior Tories privately admitted that Farage's dismantling of Starmer had provided them with a propaganda gift, weakening the government without the Conservatives having to expend political capital. However, beneath the surface, deep unease spread among party officials who recognized that Farage's resurgence could destabilize the already fragile Tory coalition. For years, the Conservatives have relied on Farage as a pressure valve for populist anger. Anger useful for pushing Labour onto the defensive but always remaining outside the corridors of true power. The spectacle of Farage commanding millions of live viewers and dominating the narrative threatened to shatter the delicate balance. As one Conservative strategist put it, "We always assumed Farage was an irritant, not a rival. Now we're not so sure." This anxiety only grew as grassroots Tory members, especially in rural and coastal constituencies, began openly praising Farage's performance and demanding the party listen to the man who speaks our language. For the Conservatives, the danger is clear: Farage is no longer content with shaping the conversation, he is positioning himself as a contender for leadership in a fractured right-wing landscape. The international dimension of the confrontation added yet another layer of complexity. Foreign media outlets from Washington to Brussels seized on the clash as evidence of Britain's volatile political climate, with commentators drawing parallels to the rise of populist figures across Europe and the United States. European leaders, still bruised from the Brexit saga, watched with a mixture of fascination and alarm, fearing that Farage's resurgence could rekindle Eurosceptic sentiments and complicate ongoing negotiations over trade, security, and migration. In Washington, policy analysts noted the potential for Britain's domestic upheaval to ripple outward, particularly as Farage enjoys strong connections with American conservative media networks that quickly amplified his performance to a global audience. Within hours, clips of Farage berating Starmer were featured on Fox News, Breitbart, and other outlets that framed the exchange as part of a broader populist wave challenging establishment politics worldwide. This international amplification not only elevated Farage's stature but also underscored the fragility of Starmer's image on the global stage, casting doubt on his ability to represent Britain with authority in an increasingly turbulent geopolitical environment. The parliamentary week following the explosive livestream confrontation was one of the most turbulent in recent history. Inside the House of Commons, the atmosphere was electric, with Labour MPs visibly tense and Conservative members emboldened as they jeered at Prime Minister Starmer during Prime Minister's questions. Every exchange was coloured by the shadow of Farage's performance, as opposition benches echoed his criticisms word for word, almost as if his talking points had been adopted wholesale by the political class. Starmer attempted to strike a tone of resilience, outlining Labour's ongoing economic plan and vowing not to be distracted by political theatre, but his words rang hollow against the constant background chatter of Farage's rising influence. Commentators observed that Starmer's normally meticulous style, carefully structured answers backed by legalistic precision, now appeared stiff and ineffective, a poor match for the unruly energy dominating Britain's political discourse. Behind closed doors, Labour aides admitted to journalists that they were caught off guard by how profoundly the debate had shifted the public conversation, with one aide describing the moment as a digital Brexit all over again. The constant circulation of clips across TikTok, Instagram Reels, and X ensured that Farage remained at the center of attention, even without holding a parliamentary seat or party leadership role. The media landscape amplified the storm with a ferocity rarely seen in British politics. Tabloid newspapers splashed front pages with incendiary headlines, while broadsheets devoted multi-page analyses to the implications of Farage's triumph. Editorial boards were split. Some argued that his rhetoric was dangerously simplistic, risking deeper division in a fragile society, while others praised him for saying what many Britons have long felt but rarely hear from establishment politicians. On television, panels of political analysts dissected every detail of the clash, from Starmer's body language to Farage's verbal jabs, creating a non-stop cycle of commentary that only cemented the perception that a major realignment was underway. Crucially, the debate sparked intense engagement from younger voters, a demographic traditionally less drawn to Farage's message. Influencers and digital creators produced parody skits, reaction videos, and breakdowns of his arguments, many of which went viral in their own right, further embedding Farage's persona into the cultural mainstream. Analysts noted that by dominating not only the news cycle but also the broader cultural conversation, Farage had achieved something more potent than a political victory. He had become unavoidable, the subject of discussion at kitchen tables, pubs, and offices nationwide. The Labour Party's internal fractures began to widen under the strain. Reports emerged of emergency strategy sessions at party headquarters, where senior advisers debated how to reclaim the narrative. Some argued for a complete overhaul of Labour's communication strategy, urging Starmer to drop his cautious persona and adopt a more combative tone, while others warned that imitating Farage's populism would only highlight Labour's authenticity gap. Simultaneously, murmurs of dissatisfaction grew louder among the backbench, with several MPs reportedly questioning whether Starmer had the resilience to carry the party into the next election. Shadow cabinet ministers attempted to project unity, but leaks to the press painted a picture of deep unease and recriminations. A leaked memo revealed that party pollsters had identified a significant swing toward right-wing populist sentiment in dozens of marginal constituencies, sparking fears that Labour could lose its fragile parliamentary majority if the trend persisted. For Farage, this turmoil played perfectly into his hands, reinforcing his narrative that the political establishment was fractured, weak, and incapable of listening to ordinary citizens. Each new revelation of Labour's disarray was greeted online with gleeful commentary from Farage supporters, who shared memes and hashtags mocking Starmer's perceived incompetence. Beyond party politics, the wider societal implications of the clash were beginning to take shape. Town hall debates, local radio shows, and community forums across the UK were dominated by discussions about immigration, cost of living crises, and Britain's global role, themes Farage had hammered relentlessly during the broadcast. Grassroots movements began organising rallies, not only in support of Farage's vision but also in opposition, as anti-populist groups mobilised to warn against what they described as a dangerous drift toward extremism. Universities reported a surge in student-led debates over the future of democracy, with campuses splitting sharply between those inspired by Farage's defiance and those alarmed by his rhetoric. Religious leaders, business associations, and civic groups all weighed in, turning the live-streamed clash into a touchstone for broader cultural and political divides. International observers continued to take note, Think tanks in Europe and the US published analyses warning that Britain might be entering a new populist era reminiscent of Italy under Berlusconi or the United States under Trump. Whether one viewed this as a democratic awakening or a destabilizing descent into division, one truth had become undeniable: the political eruption ignited by Farage's confrontation with Starmer was not fading, it was intensifying, reshaping Britain's political and cultural landscape with every passing day.